Rock on, rock on. Welcome to episode 4 of Just Folks RI. My name is Paula D. out of the Beach Rose Studio in Charlestown, Rhode Island. I'm excited to present Laura Rom in today's episode. She is a candidate, a Republican candidate running for City Council of Charlestown. If you recall in episode 2, I had on Jilly Beans, aka Jill Foneman, who is a Democratic candidate, also running for that same seat. Hopefully I get a chance to also talk to the third candidate before the special election, but time does move quickly, so we shall see. So join me in my adventure today of getting to know Laura. We got to learn more about her and her family and how she got into political life, and it was just a delight. I love getting to know new people, and she was just lovely. So enjoy, and make sure you like and subscribe to also be able to see episode 5, which is coming down the pipe really soon. Awesome. And if I don't see you before then, happy Thanksgiving and travel safe out there. Yay, we made it.
Yay. So nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. And this is actually the first time that we are meeting each other. I was just talking to Laura about how usually for the folks that I have lined up for Just Folks RI, like I know them in some capacity. And this is a situation where I just don't. So I got connected with you because you are also running for Town Council of Charlestown in this special election, if I said that right.
Yes.
And we had Jilly Beans on for episode 2, and this isn't like a political podcast, but I do, if I interview one candidate for something, I'd love to extend the opportunity to everybody that's running, because this is just about people. It's not about you as the candidate, it's about you as the person, and you're a person who's like local to the town, and I just want to get to know you more as like a neighbor.
Oh, great.
So I guess I want to start off with, tell us your name and where you're from and how you kind of got into, the election stuff, and yeah, just like the basics about you.
Well, my name is Laura Rom. I grew up in, probably about 10 miles north of Boston. But I've been in Rhode Island pretty much all of my adult life since 1981. Moved here. We moved to Portsmouth first. Was there for 28 years. I have 4 children. They were all in school. Actually, from the time my oldest one was in kindergarten, I was just enthralled with the educational system, and I just kind of, volunteered at school, and one thing led to another, and then I worked for the soccer league, and volunteering for that. And it's just, I don't know, one day, somebody that was on the school committee at the time said, "Hey, Laura, why don't you run for school committee?" And of course I said, "Are you crazy?" And, I thought he was kidding. And he elected not to run again, and it was coming up. So long story short, I did run, and I was elected, and ended up my first 2 years being the chair. It was very strange. And it wasn't because, I was anything terrific. It was because the Republicans had a majority on the school committee, and 2 of them wouldn't support each other. So I was by default. But it was actually quite interesting, because I really talk about learning up close and personal. I mean, it was great. I wasn't working at the time because I had young kids, and so I just made it my full-time job, and I learned so much. It was incredible, and I just really did that full-time. And then I went on 4 years later to run again, and was elected again for a second term. And then I had enough of that. That was it for me. I thought about, I did run again, but I did not get elected the third time. The whole committee was replaced. But in a way, I'm glad I didn't. My kids were starting to get a little bit older by that point. There were other areas of interest, all their sports and all that type of thing that I did not want to miss. So I, just raised the kids. They all graduated from Portsmouth High School. And then when my youngest Eric was 18, he was a senior in high school and he was going into the Army that summer, into boot camp. So I mean, it was when we first moved to Portsmouth, it was wonderful. You couldn't go down East Main Road without being in front of a tractor or a horse or something. And I loved it, but it really started to develop over the years. And we just wanted some more open space. So we ended up moving after he wasn't quite graduated yet, but we moved to Tiverton. And we spent 17 years there. I got involved in politics there as far as the town committee. I was the secretary for 6 or 7 years for the Republican town committee, and just did a lot of things in town. I didn't do anything elected there, and we were there 17 years. And then as my children got older, married, had children, they kind of all migrated over this way, over into Washington County, which I always have loved. And so we just decided, well, maybe this is time. So we came over to Washington County. And of course, I got involved naturally, as I always do, right away when I moved to Charlestown. And I became the secretary of the Republican Town Committee. And then I believe it was probably about maybe close to 2 years now, I've been chair of that committee. And that opened up to getting onto boards in town. I'm the chair of let me shut my phone off. I'm the chair of the Charter Revision Commission, and that's been ongoing for a year and a half now. And then,
that?
Pardon me?
What is that? What is the Charter Revision Committee?
Oh, the charter is it's the Bible for your town, really. It's all your laws and ordinances and things that you need to do. It's high level. It doesn't get down into the real weeds, but it's, what does the administrator do? What does the board of canvassers do? That type of stuff. And you have to, I believe it's every 5 years, you have to go through it and revise, go through each and every section of it. And there's a lot of it. And just make recommendations, and any changes that are made to the charter revision goes before the town council for approval, and then they can pretty much do what they want with it. They can say, okay, no, I don't want to deal with this. I like this, but let's change the language. And then it eventually goes to the voters. Nothing is done without going to the voters.
Oh,
Yeah.
what I'm getting is that no matter where you are, you're getting involved. And so what does that mean to you? So what is that like call? Because I think, like I'm a musician and I like to feed people, and I know what feeling inspired is like, but in the political realm, you're answering a call to something. And for you, what does that mean? A call to what?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think I've thought about that a lot, and I think because I get asked that question quite often because I've done so many things in several different towns, and I think it was my dad, actually. My dad was my hero in life, and he was the guy I went to and asked, he called me a crusader when I was young, and I didn't really know what that meant. As a young person, it sounded good, but I wasn't really really on board with what exactly he meant by that. But then I figured it out when I got older and when I got on the school committee. And it's just, I see something that I either don't like or I feel I could make better. And I just want to do it. I just want to change something. I want to do something. I want to be involved in something. And I guess apparently that's always been the way I've been. And yeah, that's how I started it. And unfortunately, my dad passed away almost 26 years ago now, and so I don't have him to call. But he was the one I called and asked advice, and he always gave me awesome advice. So yeah, and I think it's my kids too. I see the changes in the world. Every generation has issues. Every generation does, whether it's school or a town or state or country. but it's really changed dramatically. And I look and I have 4 children. I have 10 grandchildren. And
Wow.
yeah,
Go forth and multiply. She
yeah,
did.
seriously, I think I contributed to society pretty well. And but I look at my kids, and that's probably my biggest accomplishment is my life, as I see my adult children, and I look at them, and they all own homes, they are raising families, having working a lot of hours in their jobs, and I see that I want them, or I want their children to have the same opportunities that they had and the same opportunities that I had.
Mm.
And I see that it's getting more and more difficult, housing in particular, affording to live anywhere. Fortunately, they got in before, and they, like I said, they all own homes. So, and three of them live over this way, and my daughter lives in Austin, Texas.
Mm.
So,
And do you reminisce about the earlier years as mom? I only ask because I've got a 3-year-old, and it's funny that you were talking about, like, you get into the school stuff and you find that you do become a part of the community of where
mhm,
your child spends time. It's You can't help but like get sucked into the orbit. Like my little guy's over at the Meadowbrook, and it's a beautiful, place.
beautiful.
Yeah, a
Mhm.
wonderful community over there. And you can't I can't help but get involved. Holiday fairs coming up, and I'm doing a bunch for that, and it's a beautiful thing. So I'd love to
It
hear
is, and I think
you. I'd love
that's
to hear you
exactly
talk
right.
about your time as a mom.
Yes, yes. And now well, it's not exactly the same, but my grandchildren range in age from 4 to 24. So, and not all of them, 5 of them live out of state, but I was lucky and this is another reason why I wanted to come over to Washington County, because I wanted to be able to see their football games and their flag football and their baseball games and I wanted to be a part of all that, because that was such a huge part of my life, was because I was lucky enough that I didn't have to work full time when my kids were young. I was able to leave and go see a 3:30 high school basketball game or football game or whatever, baseball game. Sometimes I was the only one sitting out there in the pouring rain. But it's really nice, and I give people this advice that have small children like you. I know there's every time in their life has difficulties and it has great things about it. But I always tell my kids, you just enjoy every second of it, because you cannot, I know you've heard it 100 times, but you cannot believe how fast it goes. It just is incredible. And and all of a sudden you're in another phase, and what happened to the last one? Where did it go? And but I'm seeing that it through my kids' eyes now, is when my son leaves work to go see his 7-year-old's flag football game, or he coaches, and my husband had coached baseball and he'd done Cub Scouts and all that, and it was fabulous. It was just a really good life. Just a good life. And like I said, my probably my the accomplishment that I think is, I look at my kids and they're healthy and they're happy and they're productive, and they're all educated, they all have good jobs, and now they're raising their families like that, and it's just well, it's fabulous to see, you know. So
Absolutely. I think that's really like that's the good living right there. It was
it is.
right around when like COVID stuff happened. I was on a path towards more like full time trying to do more like the law thing. So I was in law school, and things just got very strange, and I was like, I'm gonna be a high powered attorney and work 90 hours a week and do all these things, and I want to make a lot of money, and there's nothing wrong with those things. But
No,
I
no.
felt this call with COVID stuff to just like, what do I actually care about? Like, what are my values became more of a question, values. And it went like bing, like family, family and connection to spirit. And so simplifying and sort of like coming back here to where my family was, it really, I feel like when people take care of their nuclear unit and they try to live well with themselves and their immediate family, and they don't have to be blood related, but what that immediate family means to you, then it can really start to trickle out, and it just does. But I feel like you got to set your own house straight first in some ways.
Hmm.
And it seems like you've definitely had your plenty of experience setting up a home.
Well, it's helpful certainly to have that foundation. I mean, I had my parents, were very much in love with each other, my whole life, and we had my mother went to a lot of mothers didn't work back then, but my mother went to work so that they could purchase a cottage on a lake in Maine. And they did that when I was just a little kid. So we still have it. Can you imagine? I still go up there. It's just the place. That's where my spiritual, being happens, is up there. I just love it. And my kids grew up going up there, and now my grandkids are going up there, and they just talk about it all the time. It's just now the family's getting so large, it's getting tough because I am still fortunate enough at the age of 70 to have a mother who is, yes, my mother
Wow.
is 91 and she is so with it. Um,
Wow.
I mean, isn't that incredible? It's
Wow.
when I, this just when I listen to stories of friends and, growing up and everything, I always say to myself, I am so fortunate. I can't say that I live normally. I don't know what normal is. I guess normal is different to everybody, but I just had such a healthy upbringing, I guess,
Mm.
is what it is.
Where
We
did
could never.
you grow up? And tell me a bit about that.
In
What did your
Melrose, Mass.
mm,
It's like I said, about 8 or 10 miles north of Boston. And we lived in the same house, all growing up until I left it at the age of 18. And my mom bought another house in the meantime after we were all grown. I have two brothers. One is a year and a half younger, who still lives there with his wife right now. And then I have a brother who's a year and a half older, and he was in the army and was killed in Germany when he was 21.
mm,
I know, I was 20 and working my first job at the hospital. And yeah,
wow.
and maybe that had something to do with it too, because that really, really cemented the rest of our family and, when going through something like that. Yeah.
Mm,
So,
mm.
and then, my husband traveled a little bit and we ended up, which I wasn't thrilled with, and we didn't last long, but I ended up out in Seattle, Washington, but it was a nice experience. We met some really nice people. When we were there about 2 weeks, I saw somebody run by, a neighbor run by with a Boston University sweatshirt on. And I thought, okay, I'm going to talk to this guy because, I'm lonesome here. This is a long way from home. And it was so strange. His sister and I worked together at the hospital, and his mother and I they worked together in the school department. I
Isn't
was
that
like,
funny?
"Oh, what's the odds of that?" You know,
Totally.
yeah,
Wow.
it was great. And then, but we only stayed there 2 years. I really, really, really missed home. It was
Mm,
nice out there, and we had a beautiful home, but it just wasn't. I just really missed my family. So,
absolutely.
yeah, so we came back here. I didn't go back to Massachusetts, of course, because the job was in Rhode Island. But that's when we came back and lived in Portsmouth. And so
Mm,
yeah, and I did a couple of things. I left the hospital doing that when actually it was during the whole AIDS situation. I mean, it was scary stuff working in a
mm,
in a laboratory during that time, and I was pregnant with my daughter, and I had a couple of scary incidences there with spilled blood and stuff like that. And it just said, okay, I don't want to jeopardize my family.
mm.
So I just did a couple of other really interesting things. I was a data manager at Raytheon. I worked actually on my husband's program. He had to come to me and ask me for the data for his program. It was kind of funny.
Yeah.
And and then they had 5-year contracts with things like that. So then when that contract ended, I worked at the Navy base for another 5 years. with C Corp.
So
And
you
so
have
a lot of interesting things, just and then when I moved to Tiverton, I said, you know what, I want to work for my town, and there was an opening. So I applied for it and I worked in the building department. And that's where I kind of learned so much. Because then I actually got laid off from that job the first time they've ever had a layoff. There was two of us that got the last two that were hired. And then, but I didn't even skip a beat because the billing inspector from Little Compton called and said, can you come over here and work for me? I said, hey, yeah. So that's what I did. So I worked in the building department there. And that's when I kind of learned the planning board because I did all their scribing for their meeting minutes and for the planning board and the zoning board. And I probably did that for about 7 years.
Mhm.
Until and then I retired fairly early. And then when my husband retired, he was 30 years at Raytheon as an engineer. And then we traveled. We did a fabulous trip in our huge RV across the country. We took 3 months and went to 30 states and all the state and federal parks, and it was just fabulous. He's from California, so we ended up that's where our destination was before we came back again. So it
How
was
did
a
how did you like that trip? I've always wanted to do like I at least want to take turns doing the like big state parks with my son. Like even if it's not as like one big trip, but going because we have so many the geography in this country is
oh,
huge and we don't appreciate just the diversity of land, and I don't even know it because I mean I grew up New York City like a city kid and then
oh yeah,
Boston, so I've spent a lot of time in the city, and then I spent a lot of my 20s chasing mountains, like lived in Colorado for a while, and there's so much beauty in this country.
incredible. That was the trip of a lifetime. I mean, I'm so glad we did it. We wanted to do that when we first retired, just in case, you never know after you retire what can happen. And so we happened to, have this RV. We towed a Jeep behind us, so we always had transportation. And we went to every place you could imagine. We ended up, we left the day after Labor Day. So kids were back in school. I purposely did this. I didn't want to make a reservation and have to be somewhere at a certain time. So we only made it maybe a day in advance. And because it was the time of year, it worked out all right. We never had a problem. But let's say we got to South Dakota, and we realized that, oh, gee, Montana wasn't too far away. So never been to Montana. So, we went to Custer's, the state park there, and it was so nice. We were supposed to be there for 3 days, and we ended up being there for 6. Because it was just, I mean, you can't see enough. You just can't. And then, of course, there's nothing that compares to the Grand Canyon. The Grand Tetons, and we went to, I mean, you name it, we went to Nevada. Now, when we always ran into a great surprise, like my husband said, oh, we went on what did they call it? The loneliest highway in America. And it goes through into Nevada, and you get this booklet from the governor. They send it to you. You have to apply for this, and the stamps. It's like the olden days, and you go to these little towns, and you'd go into a post office or one of the stores, and they'd stamp it for you. And we actually filled it. We went to every single place. But one of the places was Ely, Nevada. And my husband said, oh, there's a train museum here. I'm thinking, oh boy. So, but I'll tell you, that was such a blast. And we ended up spending an entire day there, and it was just, we just had surprises like that. And yeah, and we went to Lake Mead, and we just everywhere, Tahoe, and you name it, we went to it. Of course, him growing up in California, he saw a lot of California. But we went right down from Sacramento, where his sister lives, and we went right down Highway 1 in the RV, and we came down to the southern route and went through Bakersfield and did the whole southern route, Texas. And I always wanted to go to Corpus Christi. I don't know why. I just, for some reason, just wanted to. So we ended up doing that and just taking these little side trips all the way. Went to Las Vegas, and I mean, everywhere you could imagine. It was just, it's just the memories and the pictures are just amazing of animals and, what the wild animals and that type of thing. So yeah,
Mm.
It was really, really fun. And right now I have two of my two oldest grandchildren. One, my oldest, Kata, she's in the Air Force. So she's stationed in Colorado Springs right now.
Oh wow.
And she's
You
been there
you
several
it
years.
seems like you have like quite a few like military
Oh,
connections.
yes.
So
Yeah,
is that mostly from like your siblings, or were they also, were your parents or people before? Is it kind of a long?
my dad, oh yeah, my dad, of course, way back, all the grandparents and the uncles. I had an uncle in the Marines and a Navy pilot, and that's why I wanted to go to Corpus Christi actually because my mother's brother was stationed down there, and he was a flight trainer. And so I just had this, I don't know, I just had this desire to do that, and I'm really glad I did. But my dad was in the Navy, and he just did the 4 years. He had a real severe illness, and unfortunately, he really would have loved to have made it a career. And then my oldest brother went into the Army right after high school. And of course, that happened with the tragedy happened when he was there. And my younger brother was a Marine and was stationed out in Camp Pendleton. And
Yeah.
one trip that we had taken out there, it happened to be Family Day, and it was his boot camp, so he had been away from home, and it was so fun to spend the day with him. It was just a blast. I mean, we just went out of our way to do that because we were close enough. But, and then,
I just did a family day recently. So my husband, he's got three children from the prior marriage, and so my stepson Logan, he just graduated from Marine boot camp out of
ooh,
yeah. So we went
uh,
to San Diego, and so he
oh,
just finished
nice.
up his there's like the secondary school, and then they kind
Yep.
of they send you off to your next his real school. Um, and my husband's 14 years Navy, and
Oh
it's
my goodness.
there's
Yeah.
lots of there's just a lot of respect I feel like, and I think it's good, and it's kind of an anecdote, but I do feel like it's good energy for, young men. And not that like, everyone has to do it, but I think there is something, that there's big spirit in a youthful male, and it's a great way to kind of channel that, and it's a beautiful thing.
It
Um,
is. My brother loved the Marines. My brother's 6'3", big, huge, strapping guy. And I could just, to see him in that uniform was just, was incredible. And then I don't know, back then, things were different back then, but when my brother died, my older brother died, um, they made him get out.
mm,
I don't think they do that anymore, but that was that, sole surviving son thing.
mm,
And I think he would have probably made it a career as well. I think he spent about 2.5 years there.
mm,
And he probably would have made it a career. And then what was really amazing was my youngest son, when after 9/11, because he was too young at the time, but he just waited and waited and waited until he was graduating from high school. He said, I'm going. He spent a year in Iraq, and he spent a year in Afghanistan, and
mm.
spent 9 years in the reserves, and went to Germany, went to all kinds of different places, and he went to URI to get his engineering degree in between, when he wasn't deployed somewhere. So it was a little difficult because you had these huge gaps of time.
Mm.
So, but they were very accommodating to him. So it took him a little while, but he's got a I can't even spell it. He's got a mechanical engineering with a minor in physics and nuclear.
Oh,
So that's,
wow.
he's amazing. Yeah, he's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So he's the only one of my children that went into the
I went in.
military.
So
But
what
my granddaughter in the Air Force,
oh wow.
she's a
Wow.
meteorologist.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and the Army, I never knew this, but the Army doesn't have meteorologists, so they put the Air Force trainee meteorologist onto Army bases. So she's always been on an Army base, which is kind of interesting. So she's been all over the place too, Mississippi, Kentucky.
Wow.
Now she's in Colorado Springs. She's loving it because she skis and she loves that. So
So you've been married for a long time, and
yeah.
I just love so I I'm fascinated because I feel like I lived a lot of my early life like a tumbleweed. So constantly sort of like picking up the roots, not sure. I was always pretty ambitious, but not sure what to like do with it. And I've just found so much grounding personally in like basically once I got to the value set of like family, and I'm like, I want to experience what it's like to like be a big tree. I want to, and you can't be moving around all the time to do that. Like you've got to plant the seed, let the roots grow, be in the soil. And that's kind of like my commitment to Rhode Island is I'm like, I'm not running away from anything here. This is where I want to be, and this is where I want to, have a community and raise my child and be in a marriage, um, and explore what it's like to live through, you know, a relationship over time. So, what does I've always like to ask. I'm always like want to ask people about their long marriages and just in general the nature of like partnership and what that means to you.
Well, again, I go back to my dad. He always said to me, he always was terrific. I mean, you could have these long philosophical conversations with him, and he wasn't judgmental, and he wasn't, he listened and he gave advice sometimes when you didn't ask for it, but that's all right because, I didn't always take it either, So, so, but he always said his long-term marriage until he passed away. So I guess, that's, I guess the definition of a marriage is until death us do part, so that's unfortunately my mother was 65 when she was widowed, so and my dad died a day after he turned 68. So, and that was another thing that I went up there. I was fortunate enough that my kids were a little bit older and they weren't little, so I could go up there. I went up there. I worked a couple days a week, and then I went up there every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and left him home, picking up the pieces at home. And I went up there and took care of my dad with my mom, and went to his treatments with him and stayed, but he wanted to die at home, and that was his wish. So we just stayed there until he did, or I couldn't stay all the time because I had a job, but I just kept going back and back and back. And then, when he was in hospice, and when it was getting close, I just stayed there, and I was with him right up until the very end. So that was something that it was quite an experience with hospice. Those people are like saints. Incredible what the support and that they give you is something else. I've never experienced anything quite like that. Yeah. So that was just something that I'll always hold dear to in my heart, is just being there for him,
So you feel like the commitment your parents showed each other shaped how you feel perhaps about the nature of partnership and
Yeah. And he gave me the advice when my kids were just little, and he said, the one thing we could never get away with is anything, because it was always, what did your mother say? What did your father say? When they would always stick together, and that was some advice that he gave me way back, is that people tend to put all their efforts into their kids because they need you. They're innocent. They can't fend for themselves. They need you every step of the way for a good long time. But don't lose sight of that relationship with your husband. And it's hard to do. Especially when you have multiple kids like I do. Everybody's going in every different direction. And sometimes we would just running and having dinner. That was another big thing. He said, make sure you have a family dinner every night. And even if it's just something quick, at least to sit down and say to the kids. And my husband he had some funny things he would say to the kids. He'd say, instead of, usually you say, oh, how was your day? How was school? And you get the okay. The typical answer, that's usually what, especially when they're teenagers. But he would ask it in a different way. So what was the best part of your day today? The very best part. And he carried that through the whole time the kids were growing up. And he did the old-fashioned thing when they did something that was not right. He made them, I don't know, when they get to be teenagers, say, just as a for instance, I remember one time one of them talked back to me pretty bad, and he made them write 100 times, I will not talk back to my mother, and boy, did they hate that. They just hated it. But he had some really well, he grew up with in a family of four
Well,
as
you
well.
gotta, I think
Yeah.
what I hear is like you gotta have each other's backs because it's like
Yeah.
I mean, like for example, my little guy, he likes to go and likes to go chase the chickens. Who doesn't want to chase
Oh,
chickens?
who doesn't like that?
And sometimes it'll be like right before you go to school. So he'll be like,
Yeah.
Mom, can I go catch a chicken? And he'll be
Oh,
like,
that's cute.
not right now. And he'll be like, hey, Dad, can I go catch a
See,
chicken?
they learn very, very young to do that.
And he's like, what did your mother say?
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's what, like, we just couldn't get away with too much
Yeah.
and of course my mother elected to, she had this job in the school department. So when we were in high school, we were all, a year and a half apart. So obviously we're all in high school at the same time. And my brothers had their shares. I was pretty good, but I didn't get into any trouble, but my brothers certainly had their share. And but boy, she knew everything. Wow, she knew everything because all the secretaries in the schools, they all knew each other, so they'd call my mother. She knew things before they even happened. So
I like that. I think on the last episode with Justin Ingram, we were talking about how having a sense of community, also in general, also it's like side by side with accountability, and it actually the fact that we're not so isolated, it helps with the whole thing. Like the fact that we have each other's backs, whether it's
could you
sometimes
imagine? Yeah, could you imagine trying to maneuver this alone?
right, that would be.
That would be horrible. And so yeah, you do. I mean, in all phases of your life, I think even, now with my like today, for instance, I was campaigning up at just as a for instance, I was campaigning up at the town hall and oh boy, it was cold up there. And the first time I ever had a sunburn in November, because it had been really sunny the last couple of days, I was like, my
Yeah.
face is so sunburned. Anyway, I had a problem with the water, so I called up, my engineer son, and I said, "Hey, do you know what this means? It's sounding funny." So he had worked this morning in Connecticut, so he was coming through. I just happened to catch him, and he goes, "I'll go over and take a look." So when I got home from doing that, he was here changing some kind of valve or doing something in my shed with my water, and now it's not doing whatever it was doing before. That was probably not good. So I thought, wow, this is so cool. This is so cool to have. That would never have happened if I had lived in Tiverton. It was just
Right,
too far away.
right.
It's way, way too far. But I have my grandkids come over well, they're 4 and 6, but both of them will be 5 and 7 in December. As a
Wow.
matter of fact, election day, my granddaughter will be 7.
Wow. So
Yeah.
I have to, I would feel badly if I didn't ask you to some extent, about Charlestown, because I love that because I feel like I could just go on and on with you learning more about your life, which is the best thing. And that's kind of the fun thing about not knowing each other. I'm like, hey, this is like, look at this whole social fabric
I
family tree that I am getting to know. So I love that. So thank you.
This is how it evolves, when you're talking to people. It's just how all my relationships have evolved over the years. And some people you really click with and some people you don't, but
Right. Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. Right. But you got to cover the bases. Like, okay, like who are
yeah,
you
yeah.
and what's your life like? But so I wanted to ask, I think most sort of plainly, I think every election has its top of mind issues, and sometimes
Mhm.
for national things are kind of in a different category sometimes, but I wanted to hear from you about what you feel are sort of the top of mind issues for Charlestown residents, and just hear and you don't have to get into the weeds on anything, but just when people are making their votes on December 2nd, what do you think they're going to be thinking about?
Well, Charlestown I got to tell you, or at least in my experience from these towns I've lived in, Charlestown is rather unique in a sense that when I first moved here, I've always been a Republican. I've always my first campaign was in 1989 when I was, I don't know, 30 something years old. And a neighbor said to me, "Hey, I'm running for US Congress. Do you want to, help me?" I don't know what I was doing, but so I worked on Ron Makeley's campaign, and he just happened to be a neighbor, and so that's, I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it too. And he, of course, became he won, and he was sort of the underdog at that time, and he won. And then when he finished with that, he was the president of Bryant University, and for until he retired a few years ago. So, it was. So every town has their particular issues. Charlestown, we have a lot of water here. Obviously, we're surrounded by water. The Breachway is probably the Breachway. The Ninigrit Park is our treasures, and I think preserving that. They just got an $8.3 million chunk of money from DEM and CRMC, and the town kicked in some as well to preserve the Breachway, because it is, over 50 years, it has had no maintenance to speak of, and it's just, with all the storms and everything, it's just eroding. That would be such a disaster if that were, if something horrible was to happen to that Breachway. So I think that's a big thing. But the problem is that it's not, if it was owned, say, by Charlestown, that, I guess they'd have more control over it, but then it would also cost them. So in a way, I don't know what's better, but the state owns it. So there's really not a tremendous amount that the town can do about it, other than to beg and plead for the state and the maybe federal money to to preserve that. So that's a big thing. Ninigrit Park, of course, is the gem of Charlestown. I mean, everybody loves Ninigrit Park. And there's been a lot of controversy about that since they had to do a report. It was a requirement. They hired a company to do it. And when they did it, now this was way before my time, so I don't know what all the, ins and outs of and the issues with that were, but what was that in 2021, I believe. And they, in this report, they put in a nutshell, they put everything in that report that could possibly be constructed or renovated or built in the park. However, I don't know, a lot of people really, not everybody certainly, but a lot of people really took that offense to that and saying, okay, this council is going to, put in a 3,000 seat stadium, and they're going to do this and they're going to do that, and they're going to ruin the park. And well, that is not the case at all. It's just, they had to do this report. It was, they had to. There was no choice there, and the company elected to put, anything possible. And so I look at it as, yeah, they put everything in there that they could do, but that does not even close to what they would do. That's a big difference. And any expenditure for that kind of renovation to anything would have to go before the voters anyway.
So was that a report more or less that was seeing like what are the potentials of this space? And so they were like with a fine-tooth comb were like, these are all the things you could do. But these weren't like formal proposals like we're doing this tomorrow and we want people to get on board.
No, not at all. And there was what was it, 39 million or something? If you were going to do everything that report said, it was some astronomical, I read it, I don't know, about a year ago, but I don't know what exactly the figures were, but I think it was something like 39 million if you were going to do all that. But there's also that park has restrictions. There's 55 acres, and, it's kind of in two separate areas where you have to, it's the wildlife, and it's got some federal restrictions as well, that you can't just go build something just because just because the town council or the town voters want something. It just isn't going to happen. However, with that said, I would love to see things come into that park that bring families together. Sports events, things that are family oriented. I mean, I would love to see the youth football play there. I mean, that was such a huge part of my life. I love all that, and they have a horrible pay. They're paying a fortune to play in Westerly right now, and it's just not right because of that field behind the the town hall there that has, has some issues, and they're addressing them as they can with the funds that it costs. But it needs a drainage system. They eventually got some, was it last year, the town council expended funds to get portable lighting, so at least these kids, and when it got later on into the season, and we had to change the clocks, that they could at least see, because it would be dangerous down there. I just
Absolutely. Do you feel that the demographics shift over time? There's obviously families live here, and then there's also more like retired folks as well. And it's not to say there aren't in between, there are. Do you think that there is a way to balance the needs of like, hey, we don't want to develop this town. We want to be able to like retire and live in peace. But then also there's like, okay, well, there's families and children who should take up space and make noise and play, and they should be able to play in their own town. So how do we reconcile, and I don't even know if that's the right word, because it sounds like I'm putting them at odds. It's not at odds. And I don't want it to sound that way, but, do you feel like we can manage these two things and make everybody happy?
That's a big one. I mean, that's, I think, probably something that every town that has rural, I mean, I love it here. I moved from Portsmouth to Tiverton because it was getting too crowded for me. I didn't like it. I've always lived on a large space, and I don't want to be that close. I want to be in a neighborhood situation when my kids were young. I think that is the perfect situation. And when you live on a 2-mile or a 2-acre piece of property, and it's way high up, and you don't have any, kids can't ride their bikes and all that type of thing. I think that's where they cultivate their, how to get along with people, and how to be respectful of your neighbors and all that type of stuff. But on the other hand, well, unfortunately, we are also losing the ability as a town to not develop, because the state has taken that away from the towns. In this last legislation, there was a lot of legislation that changed drastically for us. Being on the planning board, of course, I knew that, but I also have always kept, I read legislation, and
what does that mean? So what does that mean? What is this legislation?
Legislation. Well, it's the state house, the legislators, the Senate, and the representatives that make these laws. That years up until last year, you used to have a lot of leeway in towns. This is what your charter is. This is what your charter is stating. Yes, there are state laws. There's always been state laws and federal laws that you have to abide by. But it was really up to the planning board and the zoning board to dictate what kind of things that you can do as homeowners.
So how has that changed? So what was the legislation in that? Or, well, I mean, roughly, but
it's very complicated, and we're still learning it, because even our town planner is, he's still learning. We actually had one of our planning boards, I don't know, a few months ago. I had asked if he would just go over all those changes, because they're, and then it changes, and then it changes again. So I don't know how anybody can keep up with this, never mind,
Was it generally a control shifting more to the state and less from the town overall?
Yes, and that's the control of what you can do. Like, right, so for instance, we had a petition to come before the planning board with that they want to build 158 houses up off of Ross Hill where the quarry is. Now, apparently, before my time, several years ago, they came before, I could think it was either before COVID or at that time, it was supposed to be 400 and something houses. Well, of course, no way, that was a big no. Well, then that same, I don't know if it's different people, because like I said, I wasn't here, but then they came back with this proposal for 158 houses, and the state will give a developer, they will give the developer, they call it relief, I think is the word they use, so that if they put, in this 158 development that they are proposing, there's, I think, 7 or 6 affordable houses interspersed throughout that. Now, this particular one is not single-family homes. They're single-family homes, but they're more condos that are single, condos are usually connected, but these are standalone condos.
Mm.
You don't own the land, you just own the house itself.
So, so when things like, so in this, I guess, example, what power does town council have, if any, to influence one way or another whether something like this happens?
Well, you can't anymore, basically. You can't. If they have all their regulations in place and they have everything that they're required through DEM, through everything that they need, stormwater, there's a million things they have to do. If they satisfy all that, then there's really nothing you can say. Now, the planning board has standards. Like just the other, was it Wednesday night, we had a meeting, and they have parking standards. They have different standards for for the downtown area, because you have historic buildings. Depending on what part of town you're in, there's different restrictions. There's landscape restrictions. So you still have control over those types of things. Metal buildings, obviously your zoning, how many feet you have to be away. I mean, there's certain state regulations, you have to be 100 feet away from your water source or your septic source, that type of stuff. But there, as far as a development, if the landowner has that development, they meet all the standards of now the state, which is quite different than it was last year. You can't say no.
That's
that's
so fascinating. I mean, I could go on a rabbit hole about like what influenced the state legislature to want to do that. And then you're like, okay, what partnerships with certain development or land owning entities. It makes you wonder about the relationships.
It would take a long time to explain all that, but it's a philosophy that it started probably 40 years ago. And it's just, little by little, it's really eroding the way of living that, it's not in my lifetime, and, maybe not in yours either, but I think eventually it's going to be more like, New York and Chicago, where you have high rises and you have people living not in single family homes. I mean, this is, way down the line, of course, but little by little, this is what's happening. The problem it's not a problem, but maybe it will save us actually, with Charlestown, is we have no public source of septic or our water, and we're limited. We don't have city water or town water. We don't have town septic. Now, unless they spend $1 billion or more doing that, I can't imagine it. So you're limited as to what, with the stormwater and the preservation of drinking water and all that. There are I don't know, maybe in the long run that will save us in a way, but it's also a little bit scary for that too. We're also sitting on aquifers all over the place, so we do have a constant source of water, but I don't know, if you put, what do we have? We have about 6,000 something homes in the town, and about 8,500 or 80, I forget exactly what the number is, 8,300 residents. But that kind of development can cause all kinds of issues. Okay, now what do you do if it's a homes that would be, say, purchased by families with 2 or 3 kids? Okay, now what? Our enrollment has dropped year after year after year, probably because of the unaffordability of buying a home in Charlestown. I don't know. There's probably a lot of factors, but our enrollment is down. But what happens if
you mean in the schools?
In the schools, yeah. What happens is then you also have the increase in fire and police, and when you get more. If you added another 3,000 people to this town, what's going to happen? I mean, you have to increase all that infrastructure, and that creates a whole nother issue.
Yeah, because it's like the I could see this being complex because on the one hand, you need growth to some extent. You need people to,
Right.
essentially keep having babies and raising families so that there's a reason to, fix the pitted field so that people aren't traveling to, I mean, Westerly's great. There's no shade on Westerly, but there's no reason why they couldn't, stay here or do any of these. So development in some cases in modest capacity keeps people interested in staying here and gives us a reason to stay, but obviously like you said there's only so much infrastructure, and that limited supply essentially of homes and all that can also increase the cost of things because the demand just goes up. So these things are interwoven, but that's fascinating. I'll have to look into that legislation.
Yeah, if you check out Agenda 2030, that gives you a lot of information on what what's been done so far, and what the intention is. It's pretty. There's so much information out there, but the problem is it's finding it. You have to know what to look for, and fortunately, that is a subject matter, housing and affordable housing, and that is, it's on the forefront now, of course. That's what they talked about most of their 6 months of being in session. But it's going to, for instance, ADUs. Now, that was something that the town wasn't particularly fond about.
And are those affordable development, or what is those?
No, those are accessory dwelling units, ADU, yeah. And that just means, so like, for instance, my house, I have a small house, it's 1,000 square feet, but I'm on 3 acres of the land, right? So I don't know, I've never looked into it. It could be wetlands, there could be many reasons. But if I had all the regulations in place and the setbacks and the whole 9 yards, I could essentially, right now, in Charlestown, I could essentially put another house on my property, as long as it met the standards. Like it can't be more than the footprint of what you have. That type of stuff. There are still standards that they're able to hang on to. But
Now, can those standards be evolved? Like, can the town like flex a bit and be like, well, we're updating standards to?
Yeah, the ADU thing just came out, and that was really confusing for people. So that's when I really started paying attention. Was that last year? I guess it was 2 years ago. And so I really started paying. There's actually a whole document that kind of outlines everything that you can do, but how many bedrooms you can't, that type of thing. And of course, this stuff all costs money, because I have, for instance, in my house, I have a 3-bedroom approved septic system. Well, if I put another house on this property with 2 more bedrooms, obviously I either have to have another septic for that house, or I have to upgrade mine to a 5-bedroom and tie it in.
Yeah.
And that all depends on how much land you have and how much setback you have and wetlands and buffers and it just goes on and on and on. It's really, really complicated. And
so how does one I imagine if you're on town council, well, I guess I have a 2-part question. One is, what is the scope of responsibility for a town council member? And like, so what's your job in that role? And then also, how does one stay focused? Because I can see you could really get down the rabbit hole on a few things. And you obviously have to navigate different personalities and work with not only people, your co-members, but also, the population that you're representing and serving. So what is town council? What does that work do? And what is the scope of, I guess, power? Like what actually can be done at town council? And how does one stay focused in that role?
Okay, well, let's take the first one first. So the role of town council is governance. They are the highest governance of the town. They're the ones, even when planning board, they can make some decisions, but there is a lot of things that they have to be approved by the town council. So they're really the governance of the town between state laws and federal laws and town laws, which is your charter. You have, that is that is your Bible of how things are supposed to be run in the town. Like I said, it doesn't get into the weeds of things. Like, for instance, there's a whole section on there of, okay, what's the responsibility of the town manager or the town administrator, depending on what they're called in each town. What is the government? How is your government structured? Because every town is different. Every city and town is different in the way they structure how many town council members you have, what's their terms, that type of stuff. And that goes for all the high level officers and the clerk, the town clerk, and all the it just goes, there's 208, I think, sections of our items in that charter. And having sat on that charter for a whole year, because we had to revise the entire thing, boy, that was a lot of work. I also did that in Tiverton, so I had a little bit of experience with it. But it's not easy. It's not easy being on that board. There's a lot of boards in town, of course, and Deb Carney, the town council president, I love it, and I do the same thing at my town committee meetings. Every meeting on that agenda for the town council is all of the town commissions and that have vacancies. And she lists she actually says, I mean, they're on the agenda, but she also reads them after every single meeting. And there's always vacancies everywhere because, people, they're all volunteer. Except for the Board of Canvassers, they're all volunteer. They get paid to do their job. And that's a whole big section in the charter as well, as far as the elections and all that. And so the high level stuff is spelled out. And then, what does the manager do? What is he, what is he, what is his role? What is his responsibility? So yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. And then, so really, they're the governance. That's who everybody has to go to the town council for approval, or the budget, of course, is enormous. And that starts, oh boy, it seems like you get finished with one budget and you just start another again, because it just keeps going. And so that will start right after the first of the year. They'll start having hearings on the budget, and every department looks at their budget and says, okay, can we live with this? Do we need this? It's very, very complicated. I remember doing it on the school committee, and that's an enormous budget as well. And it's not an easy thing, because what your wants are and what your needs are and what your desires are, and doesn't always mesh together, so and you have sessions. And as far as working, the 5 people that work on the, I can't speak for previous councils because I've only been here for 4 years. But I can tell you that this council that they have right now, and when Rippy was there in particular, you have to have respect for each other. You have to have, and they did. I have a tremendous amount of respect for that council. We've all worked. I've worked with them on quite a few things, including campaigning last year, because we all campaigned as a slate. I was planning board, but that we all campaigned and for each other on a slate of people running, and they all were elected. All 5 of our people were elected on our slate, and that was a wonderful thing. And so, I talk to the town council members all the time, and if I have a question about something, whether it's a personal about my property, or just anything in general, they are just so. Deb is probably one of the most responsive people I know. I've ever seen anyway, in observing councils. She's great. She gets back to you, and if she doesn't know the answer, she'll find it for you. I love having her as the town council liaison for the planning commission. Rippy was, and then they had to, of course, reassign. So she is now that. So she sits there as the ex officio member of the town council. And on the charter revision, because she's got a mind like you wouldn't believe. She could, if you ask her, well, what happened in 2008? she doesn't have to look far in her mind to tell you what happened. She's amazing, and she saves a lot of time that way, right? Because then we don't have to do the research. Although I love research, I don't necessarily have time to do that. So
Mm.
she's awesome in that aspect. And Rippy was something like no other. He was the reason, I'll tell you, the reason I'm running is because I probably wouldn't, I know I wouldn't have run, maybe not even in 26 for town council. But when he passed away, it was devastating for so many of us. He was my good friend, but he was also my mentor.
Mm.
I talked to him several times a week. And, you know, we had plans for the future as far as, you know, who was going to run for what and that type of thing. And so when he died, and you know, after several weeks of really being really devastated, because he was also he was the treasurer for our town committee. So guess what? I'm doing that job now too. So, which I really need to find a treasurer, because you shouldn't be doing the same, you know, I mean, I'm ultimately responsible for all the funds, but you shouldn't be having you know, that you need to get a treasurer. But he was awesome. I never had to worry about anything with him there. So he was very much a part of our town committee. He was very much a part of our whole group, our campaigning and everything else. So what I did was I didn't know how to navigate this. I really, truly didn't. But something just hit me one day and said, you need to run for Rippy's seat. You need to carry on his legacy and his vision, which I knew what it was because we talked about it so incredibly often. So I went, but it's a delicate situation. You know, he's got a family, right, that work at the store. So I went to the family, and of course I know people that work in there. You know, I didn't know the family well, but I know the people that work in there. So, and I had to do things because of the fact that he was our treasurer. I had to take him off of the banking and all that stuff. So it required it. I dragged my feet doing this, but I had to go in and ask for a death certificate to bring to the, which was I just it was horrible for me to have to do that. I really dragged my feet about it, but I had to take him off of our banking. And but anyway, I got to know the family as I was unfortunately asking for these things, and they are just wonderful. And I said to them, "Listen, I would really love to run for your dad's seat." You know, I was talking to the kids, and Brian, his son, who has worked there for a couple of years with Rippy side by side. You know, yeah, you have our blessing.
Mm.
And, you know, and I said, how would you feel about saying that on my signs? And he said, I'd be honored. You know, he was wonderful about it. So I would never have done something like that without checking with the family. I mean, never, you know. But I just felt this real strong desire to just carry that on. Not that we agreed with everything. We didn't. We certainly had our disagreements on certain things, but for the most part, the you know, the main the goals and things like that, and the way we think about things and the way we process and all that was so incredibly similar.
Mm.
And it was really, really he was just a fabulous person, and a huge loss to so many, but you know, he really was a huge loss to me. And so it just seemed the thing to do. So I did. And that's how I got there.
And I did.
And I
Um,
did.
so we mentioned uh some, you know, like the Breachway, Ninigret Park, some aspects of affordability and housing. Are there any sort of things at the top of mind for you that you would like to mention? Um, yeah, if there are any other kind of, and then I think I have a couple. I have kind of a couple other follow-up questions, just because I'm not super familiar with Charlestown politics. I'm kind of in my own world. I teach a
That's
lot of.
understandable with a 3-year-old.
I'm like, I teach a lot of music. I do this. Like, I
Yeah.
love to get to know people, but I don't keep like tabs. So, and I think other part of why I do the podcast too is, I think other even though Rhode Island is so small, I think over time there may be an interest in like how are the different areas of Charlestown different, especially when, bringing in people not just necessarily locally, but maybe from other areas as well. So I know there's kind of two main political groups, so to
Mhm.
speak, and it's kind of
Mhm.
interesting, right? Because
It is.
I think what is it, Charlestown residents
Yeah, Charlestown Residents United.
United, and that's
Call it crew. That's a mouthful, but
yeah,
CSU. Yeah.
and that, like, for example, they've, I believe, have endorsed you and Jill Foneman, or is that,
Yes, which isn't that amazing?
which is it's a both a
I-
Democrat and a Republican. So I just like to point that out because
yeah.
I feel like just structurally, I don't think a lot of people know or have time to like look under the belly of how sometimes these things like are working. And you mentioned your relationship with Rippy, and so you mentioned our group, and so this is kind of a context for, I think, a bit of that
Right,
is there.
right.
There's some folks, and then there's also another political group as well that's active, and they're called, what is the name of them
The
again?
CCA, the Charlestown, what is they? Charlestown something Alliance. I never remember their. I
Citizens, I
wish
don't
they
know if,
didn't have the same letters in them because they get very confusing for people. It took me a long time to get those down correctly.
now now I'm and this is just because I absolutely actually don't have any idea. Are these more just different tribes that care about um more or less the same things and just run in different circles, or are there actual main differences that voters might not be aware of in, like, generally, if candidates are as part of this group or a different group, like, do they have tendencies in a certain way, or are they just in different social circles and we actually all just care about the same thing?
Well, I've always said I think when it comes down to the bottom line, everybody cares about the same thing. However, what the difference is how you get there.
Yeah.
That I think is the big difference. Now, when I first moved here, I really struggled. You could ask some of the people that are on the town council. I really struggled with this concept because I've never seen it before.
Mhm.
I've never been involved in these. They're called political action committees, PACs. And anybody can form a PAC for any reason. There's certain, standards that you have to go through, financial standards and all that type of thing. But they generally, what a PAC will do is raise money, campaign for certain groups. Like there's one in Richmond that's called the Forgotten Taxpayers. There's one in Hopkinton. I don't know. They have different names for different things, and they have different. I don't. They have different goals, I guess. So Charlestown, what I I really had struggled with, and especially since I'm involved in the state level on the for the Republicans as well, because I am, well, being the chair of the town committee, but I'm also the vice chair. There's 5 vice chairs. Each county has a vice chair, and that we're on the executive committee for the state. So I am the vice chair for Washington County. So that's what, how many, 9 towns? Because we have Block
Right.
Island too, which I guess is not really a town, but they kind of that. And although they have never come to our meetings, they've never come over the water. But anyway, so I do a lot there. So to me, and of course, when you're a Democrat or a Republican, especially in the state level, I mean, it's not typically that Republicans support Democrats and Democrats support public. I mean, that's why you have groups that are different, right? There's different philosophies. There's different. There's a vast difference. Sometimes not as much as others, but there are vast differences in people. So when I got here and this crew thing was explained to me, and I'm thinking, oh boy, this really is not going over with me very big at all. But then I started meeting the people, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. And so there's Democrats, there's unaffiliated people, and then there's Republicans. And they're all have the same vision for, not on national levels, not necessarily on state levels, probably not. big differences in 2A and that type of stuff. But that's not what we're concerned with in Charlestown. We're concerned, I can't do anything about legislation on the federal level. It just isn't going to happen. So, when you are running for a local seat like this, you need to stick with the local issues. So when I met this group, and they're a really cool group of people, I really love them all. And so, but because I had that strong desire to run for Rippy's seat, if it wasn't Rippy, or if it wasn't, if it was some other circumstances, I might not have done that, at this time. And so, they were looking for a candidate to replace him. And I don't know how it happened. I really don't know, because I don't know Jill. I mean, she wasn't a part, as far as I know, she's on the Parks and Rec, but she wasn't a part of the group that got together and strategized about campaigning and that type of stuff last year. Everybody has a little expertise that they do, and so we would use everybody. And there's a lot of things I don't know how to do. So, but then you got somebody who takes pictures, and you got that type of stuff. So when this all happened, I could just imagine it was very, very difficult. And, I felt bad putting the crew people in that situation where they had to choose. But I also, I wouldn't win for town council on a popularity contest because people don't know me. But I certainly would win if it was based on experience,
Yeah. Right.
but that's not always what it's based on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know what people, it's hard to say. It's probably a million things people base their decisions on who to, put in that seat. So, anyway, it was real. I just want to tell you this little story about that. But so I'm down at I'm down at town hall freezing, campaigning, and Jill was down there that afternoon. We just, it's not too many people come through. I mean, it's not like a constant thing. So, you talk to people when they come through, but there's a lot of downtime too. So anyway, Jill and I are over there chatting, and we're chatting about all kinds of things, animals and this and that and another thing. And this guy comes by, and I was leaving, I guess, so I gave her a hug, and I said, okay, I'll see you later. And this guy is looking at us. And he looks at me, he says, you're Laura. I said, yeah. He says, and you're Jill. Yeah. He goes, and you guys like each other? He goes, that's amazing. Oh, funny, because we've gotten that a couple of times,
Well, I feel that is, and I don't want to necessarily go into like national things, but there is, I think, overall a desire for folks to come together. And it's like, look, none of us, for the most part, the reason it's called Just Folks RI is because it's like, look, we're just folks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like, as just folks, none of us are changing like the big things.
Changing the world, yeah.
So, and we all care about, so we can disagree on those things, and it doesn't actually matter, because if we live together and share space together, like you said, we all care about the same things, which is amazing. So, to get too tribal about a label of whether it's Democrat, Republican, or this, it's like, I don't really think that's where the dividing lines are going to be. I think it's more like, what's your overall sense of character? How do you communicate with people? Right. What's your sense of community? And are you overall a good person that people can trust? And do you have some like record to back that? So, right. I don't really think people care what the identity is necessarily, or the label.
There are people that definitely care.
That's
because
true.
There is a definite difference in philosophy of like I said, how to get, from here to there. There is Republicans tend to be much more fiscally conservative with the money for a time. The school budget, we have this huge, I'm sure it's coming down the pike again because they've already approved it, but we're going to have an enormous bond again this year to have to decide on. And especially, and I know this for a fact, being on the school committee, there's a lot of emotions when it comes to families and school age children. And hey, I have 2 grandchildren that are in the Charahoe school system. They're young, one's in preschool and one's in first grade, but they are coming up into this community of Charahoe, which is another thing that's very different in itself, having three towns combined, and that has its own set of issues with all that.
Mm.
Um, but you know what? In that issue too, in that combination of three towns that make up Charahoe, I have gotten to know so many people from Richmond and Hopkinton, and it's been just, and they've campaigned for me. They've come over because there's not anything going on in their town too, but they have been so incredibly helpful and just giving me their expertise and just I every Saturday we go walking with a group from South Kingstown. You know,
Mm.
I just love that part of it. I
Mhm.
just love that camaraderie and that, that thing that goes along with it.
Mm.
And it's just, I really feel fortunate that I was able to, and I think it was because in June, every even year, so your election year, so say in 26, in June, there's 3 days at the end of the month that you have to declare whether you're going to run or not. And that includes being a member of a town committee. Okay, so
Mm.
when I moved here in November, so obviously it was, it was cold and yucky and everything, and I was working on my house and trying to get it spiffied up. So, but when it came to June, I just went down the town hall because I know, because I used to do that as the secretary, and I went down and I filled my papers out, and this is how it happened. It was kind of funny. All of a sudden, I had just had emergency gallbladder surgery, right? I looked horrible. I felt horrible. And somebody's in my driveway with this great big enormous truck, and I'm thinking, oh boy. So I went out and then the guy says, went down the town hall to get these declaration papers for the town committee and your name is on. I have no idea who you are. He was vetting me, which is what he should do, because I could be, who knows I don't know, I could have been anybody. So I started to laugh and I said, wow, and it was the chair of the town committee at the time, Bill Coulter. And it was just kind of funny. And we stood out in the driveway and had a 2-hour conversation. And then
Mm.
I went to the next meeting and then I became secretary, and because I had that experience, and we kind of turned things around. We have a great group of about 20 people. If you have 15
Mm.
to 20 people that come, and we're getting more and more. We had a free breakfast for the community about 3 weeks ago for invited guests because we had to pay for it. So, but we had the town council there. Craig and Deb and Peter came and answered questions from people about what's going on in town. That's what a fabulous relationship we have. They came to a Republican town committee um, breakfast to answer questions from the Republicans that were there.
Mm.
And it was just really cool. I love those guys, I really do.
So, what do and this will probably be one of our last questions or so, but um, what are you, I don't know if excited is the right word, but if elected, how are you, like, what are you most excited to roll your sleeves up for? And how, I guess, what does it mean to you to be able to do this?
Well, I was thinking about that the last time I went to the town council meeting. It really, really bothers me tremendously to see that seat empty sitting there and knowing who sat in there in that seat before. And, this isn't the first time we've gone through this. Grace Klinger died 2 years ago. And the only reason there wasn't an election with her is because the charter states that if it's a year or less, then you can appoint. That's how Peter Sloan got appointed. And so to fill the rest of her seat, and then he ran again in 24. So that's how he got there. But because Rippey, it was 15 months, they had to, by charter rules, had to have a special election. So I sit there and I look at that seat and it just makes me so sad. But it would, first of all, it would mean a lot to me just to sit with those people because I have such tremendous respect for them.
Mm.
Such tremendous for all of them, all four of them that are up there. And I would, I've been going to the town. If I don't go, if I can't go for some reason, I've got lots of other things I have to do too. I watch them. I watch every single meeting as well as school committee.
Mm.
That's going to be, not that we can do much about school committee, but there's not very much, there's actually nothing you can do, for school committee. They do their own thing. You don't have any particular control over that. But it's always nice to have that relationship with them because the budgets are, all that. Budget season, like I said, is going to come up in January, like right after it's going to start. And that is a grueling task right in itself. And so that is huge, and that takes up a good amount of extra meetings. And I will have to, if I get elected to the town council, I will have to give up the charter commission, and I will have to give up, of course, the planning board, because you can't, obviously you can't do both.
Mhm.
So it would mean a lot to me to carry on some of the things that were started, for instance, with the town council. That breachway, that was just amazing that they got that grant to do that. And a grant is perfect because you don't have to pay it back. It's not like a bond that you have to pay back.
Mhm.
And $8.3 million is nothing to sneeze at.
Mhm.
It's not even close to what they need to really, really, fix it completely. But, hopefully that will come in time. The other thing that you asked me about something else, the open space and conservation properties. We are so incredibly fortunate to have a huge amount of that. We have Tucker, and we have the Carter Preserve, which is right behind my house. And, there's just huge amounts of property that we have that they have purchased or in different ways. And but what I really would like to work on is to get a commission or something going. I haven't gone down getting into the weeds too much about thinking about how that's going to be done. But the problem with acquiring all that property is that you need to maintain it. You can't just let it go. I mean, that's what happened in California, right? Because they didn't maintain all those woods and everything. And God forbid, if what scares me all the time, because I've seen this happen on my own property, is trees falling. And there's lots of walking paths that people walk their dogs and their kids and everything. And right now there's only a handful, maybe 5 volunteers. I mean, how much could they possibly do? And God bless them that they do what they do to try to maintain some of this stuff. And the DPW, they do what they can if there's a fallen tree, but they can't always get in those woods. They don't have the equipment to get in there. So I would really like to have some type of a commission or whatever they want to call it, that will, whether it's paid or volunteer or whatever, to maintain the properties that we already have before we start acquiring more. Because then you're just compounding the issue.
Yeah.
And God forbid if we had a fire deep, because remember that happened in Exeter a couple of years ago, and it was scary. My son had to evacuate in Exeter because it was getting so close to his house, and it was scary. They had to evacuate horses and everything. And that just frightened me so much. And they brought the horses up and put them in the Washington County Fairgrounds, and it was just really frightening. And I just think, oh my goodness, with all those woods and areas that we have, it's very, very scary. So that's kind of a goal of mine. Now I've only got 11 months to do all this before you have to. No, it's not a huge amount of time. And
Yeah.
when you're new on a council, and I still would consider myself, even though I have all this other experience, I still am, I've never sat on a town council before. And so there's a learning curve. There's a huge learning curve. It probably takes you a good year and a half just to, at least I know Robert's Rules of Order, which is what everybody goes by. I have those down because I've had to run meetings. And, so. But mainly the first year of anybody getting on a town council is learning
Yeah.
all
Absolutely.
the issues and the problems and and just the different personalities and how it go. I mean, fortunately, I have the personalities down, so so that's not anything. But yeah, and just learning how to be respectful of everybody's opinion. Because not everybody, even though they're very respectful of each other, they have their arguments over things about how to proceed. There's one a bond right now that they've had some pretty good heated discussions of how to fix an old problem that was there way before any of those people were on there. But you still have to fix the problem.
Yeah,
however
it's in
you
your
do it.
lap wherever it
Exactly.
started.
You can't just say, oh, well, sorry, it wasn't during my time, so I'm not going to do anything,
So
you know.
this episode will be going out soon, probably right before we're going into Thanksgiving, more or less.
Mhm.
So, do you have any? As I guess it would be a nice way to send off this evening. Do you want to share, I guess, some of what perhaps you're grateful for in this life, and maybe some good wishes to your fellow Charlestown residents?
Oh, and you know what? Fortunately, because I've been up there every single day since early voting, that's what it's so nice to say happy Thanksgiving to people and just enjoy people coming and going, whether they vote for me or not. It's just, it's always good morning. It's always, yeah, I mean, of course, as you can probably tell, my family is the most important thing. I also have rescue dogs. They're actually, I'm surprised they're not barking through this. I have one from Afghanistan that I
Wow.
rescued from Afghanistan, which is a whole nother story. But she actually has her own page called Saving Adele, and I documented every single minute of it. And yeah, my son and yeah, so she's with me now. She'll be 15 in February.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I have two. I've rescued dogs. At one time, it's a good thing they were little because in Tiverton it would have been considered a kennel. I had six dogs that I rescued from one situation or another. Um,
Hmm.
and I have two little ones. I have a Yorkie and a Maltese. Yeah, they're
I love animals. So we've got three
well.
dogs. I've got a
Oh my
husky,
goodness.
a
See?
poodle. I got a little poodle. I had another
Oh, my
husky.
favorite. That's the six of them I had were poodles. They were
Oh,
all small
dude,
poodles. I
they've
had a
got
Yeah, I had a five
personalities.
pound, I had a little 5 pound chocolate poodle. And her name was Audrey. Oh, I mean, I know you're not supposed to have favorites, but I've had like 20 dogs over my lifetime. And she was my absolute favorite. Oh, she was and she died from lymphoma. And
Sweet thing.
I did my only pet I had die in my arms. I
Mm,
usually, and I still miss her so much. It's been I don't know, about 7 or 8 years now since I've gotten these two guys. So,
mm.
but yeah, but the
And
one from is
the
pretty special.
I think the most important question I have is what is your favorite dish at Thanksgiving?
Banana bread. Banana bread, which I is my mom's recipe and I make. I used to have things, well, my mom had it until she was about 80. She did the Thanksgiving for the family. And then I took it over but now my kids have a much bigger house and everything, and we all like to get together. So I just make a bunch of stuff and bring it. We have it in my
Hmm.
son's house in Hope Valley. And then the kids can just stay in their own house and have fun. But yeah, but it's probably, which was my dad's favorite as well.
Yeah. So
Always making bread.
does it require really, really, really ripe bananas?
Yes. As a matter of fact, they're sitting on my counter getting ripe right now. And the other secret is very ripe, and you throw them in the freezer. That's the best to use them frozen, and then take them out. Of course, you can't peel them when they're frozen, so you got to let them sit in a dish for a bit, or put them in the microwave for 20 seconds or 30 seconds. But yeah, that makes the best banana bread is frozen, very, 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 very brown bananas.
Oh yeah.
And I always
I
throw
love
one
that.
in. They call for three. I always throw four in if they're not huge. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. Well, Laura, thank you so much
Yeah,
for
thank you. It was a real pleasure speaking with you.
this was
Thank you.
lovely.
Yeah, and I'd love to share this. I'm sure my family would love to see it. As a matter of fact, my sister-in-law texted me when I told her I was doing this. She said, "Can I watch it live?" I said, "I don't think so."
No,
I'll
but
just
as soon as I basically I press export and I look at the audio and make sure, our levels are at, someone's not too quiet, I'm not too loud. And as long as that's good, then I send it off. So as soon as it's ready, I will absolutely send it your way and you can share it with
You
whomever.
want to come say hi? Uh,
Oh,
This is this is my Afghan dog from Afghanistan. Let's see if you can see.
eh.
Can you see her?
Oh, I can see the top. Oh, buddy.
Adele.
Hi, Adele. Who's a Oh, who's a good girl.
Oh, she's such a sweet girl. Oh,
Oh.
she saved my son's life, but that's another story too.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
We'll have I would love to have you back on maybe
I was telling Jill that story. Oh, that's what we were talking about. I was telling Jill that story the other day.
I was about to say, I bet you and Jill talked about the dogs. I could totally
Oh
see
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah. That's what we she's a very sweet girl. She's Jill.
Oh yes, yes,
Yep.
absolutely.
I've been to the Rat several times, and
Yeah.
we had a big fundraiser there last year. The crew
Okay.
members we had under the tent, and that's the first time I met her actually.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
she was working, unfortunately,
Yes.
partying with us, but
Yeah.
but she makes a great martini. I
Perfect.
understand. Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to have you on sometime. I would say win or lose post election, and I would love to hear, the Adele story. I think would be the prime. I'd love to hear more about that. That sounds
Yeah, I'll have to check and see if her page is a
active.
public page or not, but I could make it public. And yeah, it's called Saving Adele. And it
Hmm.
was just every single, talking to Pakistan and talking to Kabul, and it's just was the craziest story of how it all happened. And
Wow.
the people that donated it, the expense of her coming over here, and it was just the craziest story. It's that will stay with me my entire life. And how I managed to do that, I still don't really know. I had to have some help from above for that one,
Mhm.
you know.
Well,
So,
Laura, it's obvious you have a big heart and tons of
oh, thank you.
experience. I wish you the best of luck, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
All right, thank you so much, and enjoy
Thank
the
you.
little guy while he's little.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Little
Okay,
Pete.
Paula.
Little Pete.
Yeah, take care. Thanks so much.
I know. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.